Hello and welcome. You're viewing the Citizens Journalist podcast, Mesa County Compass, that brings you the news that you can use from a different point of view. I'm Ruth.
I'm Lisa.
And together we are Mesa County Compass. Our goal is to create an informed, current, active citizenry armed with the facts. We will be covering what's new to you, what it means to you, what you can do about it, and provide you access to the decision makers when we can. Good afternoon. We're here with Mesa County Compass this afternoon, and we are going to re-interview Mr. Craig Hall. He is going to be kind of giving us an update on what's been happening with the paper. He is, of course, the owner, publisher of the Business Times. Welcome, Craig.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You can say editor if you want. It says editor. They keep putting editor in there, but all I know is anytime I send in a column, it gets edited.
Yeah.
There you go.
Am I the editor? I don't know.
I guess it depends on how you define editor.
That's probably
There
true.
you go.
The only thing I can tell, and I'll tell the people, is I don't decide what goes in the paper. Never have, never will. Been 25 years of doing that.
How is it decided what goes in?
It's the stories that Tim and Brandon are chasing. The stories that come to us. We get probably 20, 30 press releases during the week. Some of them you'll see they end up on the business briefs page. So a lot of them turn into larger stories. You know, folks are sending in something and saying, hey, so-and-so did this, or our business is doing that. And Tim looks at it and says, that sounds like a neat story. It's the same thing Phil Castle did all those years. And so that's sort of the process. But what we're finding as we've gone weekly, we're more frequently in the community, and one story leads to the next story, leads to the next story. And invariably, while they're out doing stories, they'll hear a little tidbit from the subject of the story, and we've got a paper next week, and there's something interesting, and we'll go talk to those folks and create another story out of it.
Right.
So you're growing.
There's never been a lack of opportunity for stories in this town. There's just a ton of them. And now one of the things that we're doing that's different is we're covering more community and civic-based news. And there's certainly a lot of material in Grand Junction for that right now.
There is
Mesa County for that.
Right.
And it's a little more fun to cover. It's a little more digging in. But we have to go back to the original question, we have a once a week. We literally have now, we've grown up as a paper. We have an editorial meeting, staff meeting every Monday morning. We talk about the stories that we're chasing, but they get presented to me. I just write down, my main concern is I've got 24 pages filled half up with advertising. Are we going to have enough content? And the guys always come up with plenty of content to cover what we need.
Right. Because you're changing your focus just a little bit. Still all the business things, but with the community and civic engagement, you're providing a different perspective, I think, than what the Daily Sentinel has been providing over the years. That's maybe more information and not with a certain spin on it.
As more local information.
Well, yeah, that's what we're best at, is everything. The reputation that we have is it's all local news. It's all original content. So we're going to know who to talk to, without getting into leaning or bias or whatever you want to say in a story. But it's never been about how do we want to tell the story. It's ask questions, write down the answers, print the paper. We'd like to think that we're hearing that we're continuing to do that type of reporting when it comes to the civic stories, because no question should be off limits. We work very diligently. If it requires a full paragraph quote, then there's going to be a full paragraph quote. We don't want things out of context. Here's what we asked, here's what they said, and it doesn't matter if what personal bias never comes into it. And the fact that I just said that makes me feel a little queasy, because it shouldn't have to be stated. It's just how you do business in the newspaper industry.
Well, and it's a difference too in how much digging do you do?
Yep.
Do you stay on the surface, or do you go a little bit deeper to find and ask more questions? And then also the difference in who your audience is, because I know and I know it shouldn't be that way in my mind, but it's the way it is.
Yes, it is.
That you write to the audience that you have. And if your audience wants to hear a certain perspective, that's the perspective that you give them, because that's what sells papers. And I know it shouldn't be. And then the real concrete line that I think should be there between what's news and what's opinion.
Yeah, and
we cover both opinions?
Yes.
Right.
Well, you're going to, if you're covering news, you're going to get the opinion of the subject that you're talking to. That's
right.
That's bound to come out. But you can hone that craft doing profile type stories. Our business stories are really profile stories, where we ask somebody, it's no different to ask somebody, how'd you get into this business? And then they tell you your story, and that's what makes those great stories interesting.
Right.
But you can ask that same question of, how'd you get into politics? I mean, that's an easy, great, perfectly acceptable question to ask Ben Van Dyke.
Right.
How'd you get into running for city council?
Right.
Well, you know what? It really, we spelled it out in a story in the Business Times, because we did a story about his business that was greatly affected by community and civic things that were going on. Was it needed construction? Sure. But do things like that affect business? I mean, the front page story of this particular edition is about B Sweet Bakery, who they've been double whammied with all of that stuff going on.
Right.
And now it's sitting right in front of them.
Right.
But when you dig into that story, you come up with another story, which we will cover sometime in the near future, of why are they doing all that across the street from First Street?
Okay, well,
and why is it going all the way out to Walmart?
Yes. Well, and I know what they had in the paper is that they're making that multimodal, and
Of course they are.
yeah, that they need to do that, and that lines up with the 2020 comprehensive plan and that sort of thing. But I want to go back to, take Be Sweet, because oftentimes this is what happens is it's generality. So talk to us a little bit about what is happening at Be Sweet, how it reflects the environment in Grand Junction, and how it affects the community.
Well,
and business.
So you're going to have me at a little bit of a disadvantage. I've only delivered the paper today. I haven't read it.
Okay.
Because the paper was delivered overnight last night. My job is to get it out on the streets.
That's publishing.
That's part of publishing, is I do the delivery. Part of other publishing is I'll be vacuuming the floors tomorrow at the office. But, my understanding through it, that I just know from the peripheral conversations we had in our meeting that this is what we're going to cover. It's what we continue to see, and we had a story about a couple that bought a house on 25 Road, is, are people being fully informed as to what's going to go on? You're a business owner and you're sitting there, number one thing that a business owner wants when you are a customer service location is access.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay. Did B Suite know how bad their access would be just
when they opened?
Obliterated. When they opened. Yeah.
Right.
Did they know this was coming?
Well, when they opened, the access was great.
Yeah.
You had the judicial part, you had the city and
you had a lot of traffic.
And it seemed like an ideal location.
Yes.
So when the city does something, and listen, if the road work is needed, the road work's needed.
Right.
Okay,
Agreed.
you can understand that. But at the same time, what is the city? What is the county? What is the state? Because that whole area, from coming up First Street around the bend by the county services all the way shooting out, is that state work.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, I don't know if federal highway funds probably are who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
Because if you extend out through the bypass, the signs are out there when they widened the bypass over by Rimrock, courtesy of Barack Obama and blah blah blah. So it's PR. So who knows? But how much information did B Suite have? And I think that's what
And
these
what
things
does
really
it-
comes out.
And what does the city, who is supposed to be for the businesses? I mean,
You'd like
what
to
do
think
you-
our
what
city
do you
people are for
exist
the businesses, but we found
Then-
out that some on council aren't. But we can go into that later.
We can. But when you have that, then what is the city going to do?
What's their
to help?
responsibility?
Yeah. To
Yeah.
help with the access, or to say, well, we can shut off this part for a little bit, and then we'll shut off this part, and make sure people know
I
that's
mean,
available.
you could even ask the question of the city, and then, and this is, folks, this is going to go against everything that, you think Craig Hall's firm line is, should the city compensate?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, when they, that was a big question that was bandied about when they were building Riverside Parkway.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
What the compensation, because they were literally, there's a lot of eminent domain that went on there,
Yeah.
a lot of businesses that remained located down there. What was the effect on them? And I know some would argue compensation wasn't necessarily equitable. And for a city that's all about equity,
Usually isn't.
it's no. And first off, there's no such thing as equitable. It doesn't really matter because everybody has their idea of equity.
Exactly.
But
and it should be equal.
it should be, and it should be X amount per this, per that. But if you're going to do eminent domain, then
You need to compensate. That is part
yeah,
of it.
and it's got to be a policy, and it's got to be an exacting thing, so that everybody's
It's-
treated the same.
Everybody's treated the
And
same.
you're getting
Which at this point is not, and I won't go there either.
well. But if you see, one of the problems I think that you see, what's the market value of your property? Well, if the city wasn't putting a new road through here, probably more.
Right. Exactly.
So there's all kinds of just gray areas. Listen, it doesn't make the job any easier on the city, but at the same time,
But you have to look and say, this is it's an example of, we think this is a great idea, but maybe we haven't thought through the whole thing and looked at what are the unintended consequences. Unintended consequences are so important.
well, and
That's
it's
bottom line.
and it's a major part of pretty much every government program. There's always unintended consequences, and that would indicate you cannot anticipate all of them. Fair enough, but you can anticipate there will be them.
Right.
So
And how are we going to listen? Because I did read something by Be Sweet that they had on Facebook,
Yep.
and to me, what it sounded like is that City Council hadn't even listened to them after they started saying, "Hey, help!"
Yep.
We're going down, and the same thing happened to that Froth and Folly. They
that poor
closed.
guy. Well, he never. Yeah, and there's some other factors that went into him not even attempting to open. But yeah, I mean, there's a guy who invested probably a good chunk of his life savings
I'm sure.
to
Yes.
create that,
Yes.
and he never even got a chance because of all this stuff. And I know of a couple businesses here in town. They're looking to open franchises, 2 really good franchises, and every time they turn around, there's something new from the city or from the state. And one of them is, the state's requiring you put in X number of car chargers based on accessibility, while reducing accessibility, it's and reducing the number of parking spaces.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And then, this person isn't in the car charging business. That's not what the business they want to be in.
No.
And so,
And they're not staying there that long. They're not an overnight.
well,
business.
but here's the other thing. Let's say you have 50 parking spaces. The state says you've got to take 7 of those and put in car chargers. Well, you just lost 7 parking spaces. You
because
probably
they have to remain open.
they have to
in case
remain
somebody
for
wants to.
the electric cars, for the special people.
It's like handicap. I mean, by the time you get electric and handicap,
How many have you lost?
You've lost so many.
Okay. And then part of your business plan is, well, our average customer is going to stay here 45 minutes.
Right.
Well, if you're charging your Tesla that you've run down, maybe you're there 3 hours. So then, now you're even limiting the number of Teslas that can pull in, who have their own special parking places. This is not a tirade on,
electric
handicap
vehicles.
spaces or, but shouldn't it be up to the owner of the business if they want to put in a car charger?
I would think so.
It should.
I would.
It should.
He's not getting compensated for doing it.
Right.
He's got to bear the cost.
That's right.
And then, what's the unintended consequence on their business?
Right.
When it's something, if you're putting in a franchise that specializes in fast food, it's about turn.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
And it's just like even if you're not in fast food, we're going to turn this 3 tables tonight at my restaurant. Well, if you got 37 Teslas lined up in your parking lot,
you're not going to do it.
you're not going to do it.
It looks to me like that would be another subject for another time. But why
That's going to be a story in the business times first. So,
so why wouldn't you have a specific place set aside for charging stations?
well,
Or why
This-
unless it's
And rather than
your
in front of-
business to
yeah,
Rather than-
but the city or the state isn't going to require that of themselves
right.
if they can make the business
Of course
do
not.
it and pay for it. And I mean, and that's what it comes down to. And that's, and to go in our conversation that we had before, these are just things that people aren't aware of.
Exactly.
When he told me that, I was just like, you got to be
Out of
kidding
mind.
me.
Yeah.
And then they just say it's not going to be something that's viable for me, so I won't do it. And
Well, and they've already, listen, this is in addition to being slowed down by the local approval process that
Right.
we've all been complaining about. This has been on the radar since I moved here 25 years ago. The Building and Planning Department of the City of Grand Junction slows down the process. They're a year and a half in the planning
Oh, my.
process, and this just got tossed on them.
Oh my.
So we've got a new city council,
Yeah.
and the old city council seems to think they were doing everything the way that the vast majority of people wanted, and that they were listening to the public, and that they can't believe that
Yeah, they
the
still
public's that democracy is now hangs in the balance
Yeah.
because those changes were made without secondary deliberation. So we're going to give you a chance to say, what do you think? And what do you think of the old?
Well,
what do you think of the new? What do you think of the changes? And
I
how
mean,
will they impact us?
Yeah, I mean, the jury's out on the new, obviously. I think that there are a couple of things. I mean, if they could, to their credit, they took action on 4th and 5th Street. And to the detriment of the remaining souls on City Council who can't see the forest for the trees, that election was 90% about 4th and 5th Street.
It was indeed.
It absolutely was. It was the main determining factor, I think.
It was.
And it brought in, whether they like it or not, it brought out the vote, and it brought out the vote in the spring vote. Imagine if they were pulling something like that in the fall vote. It would have been more of a mandate for this council. So the council gets credit for stopping that in its tracks. I think there are a few other things like the Whitman Park that probably, you could put a little stop on it, because there's other problems that this council needs to face. But the old council, has, they're like, we did this, we made a decision, we threw some money at it, we did our PR campaign with local media who were more than willing to put us above the fold or on TV so we can talk it up about all the great things we did. But now we're on to this, and we don't really worry about what's going to happen over there. And you brought up one of the classic examples of that, which is the Orchard Mesa pool. I mean, it's been a football bandied about for the last 5 years.
Right.
But you know what? That falls under the operation of the city. Yet they don't fix it. They don't. The big fight was, are they going to close it? Well, we can't close it, because then you're getting into the feelings of the populace. So coming out and saying, what would be wrong with saying we really need to close it, but we're really going to try to build a new one? I mean, that should be an easy thing to say, because you know what? That thing may be to the point where you look up and go, we really need to close it, because we've let it go. We let it go for 20 years. The last 5 years we've been bandying about.
We've been bandaging it.
While bandaging it, yeah. But we're just playing political football with it. Maybe we need votes from Orchard Mesa, so we'll bring up the pool. And So it goes into further disrepair. Because I haven't seen a story where they said, we fixed all the problems in Orchard Mesa Pool. I've seen the problems are getting worse at Orchard Mesa Pool.
Well, we got a boiler coming, and
yeah. Well, so you look at these things and you just wonder, this is what happens when you hop from one thing to the next thing. Because really, city council should be a pretty boring job. Okay? Make sure the trash trucks are running. Mm-hmm. When it snows, try to get your 3 salt trucks out there and do what you have to do. And explain to people why we don't own 50 salt trucks. It's because it doesn't snow very often here, but, run
we'll
parks.
Send that out 50 times.
Yeah,
Don't worry about it.
Believe me, they're working around the clock when we get that 4 inches of snow, even though most of it's melted by noon. But, but do Parks and Rec. Do the things that the city of Grand Junction is supposed to function and do.
That they charge to do.
Yeah.
They have departments that
they
are
have
being
departments
paid,
that do that. And that's why I always say, 90%, 95% of the money that comes in through tax base and everything else is already spent because it's budgeted for, because these are the services that city council says, or the city of Grand Junction says we provide to our citizens. Mm-hmm. Okay. So if that's all they need to do, and they have departments to do it, and experts, because they all, like Abe says, talk to the experts when you're looking at stuff. Mm-hmm. They don't have experts, but they should have somebody who's pretty darn good at running trash trucks.
Then they hire somebody to consult with.
Yeah, always outside.
Then they go to an outside. But what happens is they spend 10 minutes on Orchard Mesa Pool during a meeting, and say, well, we're going to do this, we're going to look at it further, and we're going to, but then it's forgotten about for 10 city council meetings or 20 city council meetings, right, or what have you, because something major went wrong. Because they're over here working on this other thing now. Mm-hmm. But because most of what they do is, like you said, set into the departments, you've got personnel, you've got staff to operate and do all that stuff, what do they really need to be working on? The city should it should be turnkey for most of what the city does. But that's not what our previous city council mm-hmm. like to do. I'd like to see, quit doing all this stuff and just operate on a city so that things don't go wrong, so that Orchard Mesa Pool doesn't deteriorate. Or, what's wrong with going to the people and saying, community pools have a 50-year shelf life, okay? And Orchard Mesa Pool's 47 years old.
And we have maintained it
and
during that whole time.
We've done a pretty good job. And we've done our best. We've maintained it. We did what we're supposed to do. But you know what? We're in that transition period where we're going to have to phase out one pool, and we're going to have to try to, and if the community wants it, and they want another Orchard Mesa Pool, then we'll get together and we'll start having some hearings on that and try to fit it into the old Orchard Mesa Pool budget. Maybe we need a few more bucks. Maybe we can get a little more help from the county and the school district, who've been helping all along with Orchard Mesa Pool. Mm-hmm. So they probably, but that's all you need to manage. You don't need a 500-page binder the weekend before you go into a Monday city council meeting, because you've got all this stuff on your agenda. Most of it's just, maintaining and it's a lot of it's the same way with the county.
Well, I think the difference is that for many, many years, and I'm not sure how many, because people don't know what's going on. They don't know, and frankly, it's not that interesting. When you go through and you look at it and you say, okay, you're going to have a meeting at 9 o'clock in the morning mm-hmm. when
nobody's available.
75% of the population is work, or we're going to have it 5:30 in the afternoon, and you have to know what's going on. And they say, well, we put out press releases, but the press releases tell you what they're going to do that's already been decided, not what do you think about what we'd like to do.
Wait a second. What about all this collaboration I keep hearing about that people are bragging about who are on council? It's all about collaboration. If we don't collaborate, then we can't make good decisions. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying.
Yeah. And the collaboration has not been there. I mean, before, if only 2 people could set the agenda, and mm-hmm. so if I was the minority, nobody ever heard what I wanted to say.
Yeah, and I think you have that, and I think, like I said, if you're hopping around to different things, then this one just, it doesn't get buried, it just gets forgotten. But you've already made a decision on it. And sending out a press release to say, this is what we did, report it, I don't think that's how you do, that's not how you get community input.
Right.
That's telling community you don't want any input.
The thing about it is that for years, a large percentage of us, I'm saying myself included, even though I'm not in the city, but I think that there is a certain way cities should function. And they should function by taking care of what was already set.
Yep.
So I don't have to worry about it.
That's like I said, I think that's 90% of it.
And then when all of a sudden these things pop up and you say, where'd that come from?
I think there's a lot of that.
There is a lot of that, and it's just not something that the people expect. So therefore,
or that the people can't afford.
Yes,
that's my other problem.
Affordability.
Is oftentimes, what they're proposing, like with Whitman Park, let's use that as an example. That park is great, and again, we've talked about. It having like an ice skating rink and all of these
it's
food
it's going to have everything.
It's one of those things that is kind of a boutique for a affluent city. That's the downtown area.
For those downtown livers. Yeah.
And what you don't have is you don't have any parking to get there. So these people are biking and walking, and it's idealistic, and it's not
the Stepford Wives.
So let's funnel everybody who's biking and walking into the 4 busiest one-way streets with no parking that you have to cross to get to it.
Because we don't want you to be parking. We don't want you to have a car. We want you to bike or walk there, and walkability.
I didn't say it made sense.
Yes. But what I'm saying is the vast majority of people, maybe even with a food truck, if you look at the average income that they talk about, $66,000 for a family of 4, then how much is the cost of a hot dog at a food truck?
Yeah.
And
well,
if you take
who are you building it for?
Exactly.
Who are you building it for?
And that's been my problem with City Council. It's been for a very small group that we are making our decisions.
Yes, and every policy outside of the normal operations of what the city's supposed to be doing caters to that at some level. And I think that that's what you see, and I think that that's what the people looked up and said, wait a minute. I'm driving my 14-year-old Ford F-150, and I don't have any desire to go to Whitman Park for a food truck.
Or any need
to go, or for a skating rink. Why would you put in a skating rink? Are we lacking skating rinks? Is this an outdoor skating rink? It can't be an outdoor skating rink because we don't have enough weather.
We don't have enough weather.
To
and the indoor skating rink was for how long? Did we have an indoor rink?
Yeah.
And then we finally had to do other things with it. But nonetheless, I think it's still
hockey. But first off, there isn't enough room to build an indoor skating rink there.
No.
It would take up the entire block
and
to even have a decent size one.
I just heard skating rink. I don't know. You cannot. I didn't look at the plans.
I don't know. I have a skating rink in my little winter scene that I put up at Christmas.
Little pond.
Well, it's just a nice hometown.
It'll be like one of the Hallmark movie skating rinks where they skate in a 60-foot circle. So, and I like Hallmark movies, but I really don't buy into the 60-foot circle. But enough of that. So, so then the question comes down to what are they doing and who are they doing it for? And when I look at the whole downtown plan, I just see, to me, it feels like we're building this for the people that we want to live downtown with. That's what it feels like to me. And I don't think that someone in a capacity of serving the community, I don't think the community gets well served if that's what the vision is for downtown. But, because there's a city council person who was quoted as saying, we all want a thriving downtown. Well, I don't want that thriving downtown. I don't want your thriving downtown. I think the downtown merchants can decide how they want to thrive being on Main Street. And I think you should do everything in your power to get people conveniently and safely to Main Street. And whether we slowed down traffic on 4th and 5th Street by 3.2 miles per hour isn't the solution, the way that you did it. And to go back to your other point about the communication, that particular plan was never communicated.
Was not.
There were 3 or 4 other plans that they said, hey, they could be this, could be that, could be this. The communication only came after 4th and 5th Street pilot project was done. Then they had the little get together at the Art Center.
Right.
That was for 7th.
And that was for 7th.
That they were proposing.
Right. Yeah. And
because 4th and 5th
and by the way,
done.
and there's simply no way that that was a 50-50 crowd.
No.
Unless they stacked the other 50, or they decided not to talk to the other 90. so I mean,
They had the little pop-ups at the Red Barn, and they had the little pop-ups on Main Street, the Farmers Market.
Well,
I think there was 4.
I don't know anyone that took the survey at the Thursday market, and I don't know what the questions were.
Right.
But I would simply say, I would gather, given the questions that we just saw in the latest poll on 4th and 5th Street, they were worded something like, "Are you for public safety
Right.
for pedestrians?"
That's exactly what it was.
Well,
And that's a tough one to answer no to. So you're going to get positive reactions, and you're going to say, "Look what the people said." But there's a dozen different ways you could slow down traffic on 4th and 5th Street.
Well, and the other thing that Cody has brought up in the past is when Jason Wynn has said, look at the difference in the accidents. Look at these accidents. This is what's happened. But what Cody said is, we don't know what the cause was. Was the cause speeding? If you're just saying...
Was the cause the pedestrian?
Yeah. Was the cause distracted driving? Oftentimes it's called an accident because...
But it's distracted driving.
Yes.
I think 99% of accidents are distracted driving.
Of course they are.
Just depends on what you're distracting with,
Or
number one.
You're watching, or was it somebody backing out, from a parallel parking, and then they went, oops, I didn't see you because I was looking over here because that curb's over here.
You're heading up 5th Street and heading out of town, and they're doing the Tai Chi in the park. And you're like, wow, they're doing Tai Chi in the park.
Boom. Yeah.
That's right.
Because I would always stare at the Tai Chi in the park. I would drive that all the time. But at the same...
And you don't know sometimes, was it the bicycle? Whose fault was
We
it?
actually-
Was it a bicycle's fault?
We actually called the Grand Junction Police Department and said, were there any pedestrian, bicycle accidents, car accidents on 4th and 5th Street in the preceding year before the project? You know what the answer was? 0. Yet they had one in the first 3 months of putting in the pilot project. But see, you don't get to hear that stat.
Right.
No.
Because you can't even, if you wanted to play with the statistic, you could come out as a concerned citizen and say, you can't even multiply, because you can't go from 0 to any number, but you can't even multiply the accident effect of putting in the pilot project. Right. So if you want to play those games, but the fact, it goes right to your point. What was the accident? Who caused the accident? Was there an at fault, or was it just one of those things that happened? Because if you really wanted to stop accidents on 4th and 5th Street, you would outlaw vehicles.
All of them.
And you'd make every vehicle, because you certainly have to outlaw the Hells Angels on our scooters. So so that's how you get rid of it. It's the same thing. Right. You want to outlaw drunk driving, outlaw booze, outlaw cars, outlaw bars. Okay, is that going to happen in America?
Right.
Maybe in some people's. Because what was the pilot project a step toward? Eliminating cars or public safety? What was it a bigger step toward? And to me, it was a bigger step toward eliminating cars.
Right.
It was.
And how in what way, other than, and you can say, okay, we heard from the people that live. How many people really live on 4th and 5th Street? And the reports in the paper, the kids are out there playing with their pets and they're bicycling all over. You're like, no, they're not. I mean, I drive them almost every day. I mean, my office is on 6th and North. I'm on those 2 streets almost every day.
Well, and if you look at quite a bit of that, it came from the comprehensive plan and it came from the sustainability and adaptation plan.
Yes.
That
all lead toward
is our
what?
value. We want to have fewer cars. We want to have nobody having lawns. We want to build up the density in the city. But even when you made those plans, which you said is what the community wanted, you picked the people on the committee that created the plan.
Right.
So if you're
So we do have a
not
planning
representing-
department that can
Yes,
get things done.
no, this, yes, a steering committee that
Steering
can
committee,
get things done.
yes.
So, but yeah. So then when you go to, but then when you look at it just as an outsider, you can see exactly what it's all about. But you want people walking around and having the walking, biking locality downtown.
Mm-hmm. They're
Few-
watching too much House Hunters,
Yeah,
where they
something.
always want.
Yeah, my
walkability.
budget. Yeah, and I train goldfish, and my budget's 1.5 million. And so, but if we add my wife's income from trimming rabbit ears,
Yes, butterfly
we get
therapist.
butterfly therapy even better.
Yes.
That's
Yes,
probably 2.5
yes,
million.
Yes.
But you claim you want all of that, and what's the first thing you do? You get rid of the grocery store downtown.
Right.
And what was the grocery store is really it's not an outreach, but it's a result of the homeless problem
Right,
downtown.
Exactly.
That's why the grocery store is not downtown.
Mhm,
Right.
Exactly. They said,
And
can't
but
do this.
who's been addressing whose sole purview is the homeless problem? City of Grand Junction. And they've just bebopped them around. And I hate to say they're using them, but they're using them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Why would and then you locate, and I'm going to say it this time, the Day Spa Salon downtown with a limited time frame. And now you're making decisions probably in private because we're running out of time. Now, see, we only got another 60 days, right? We got less than 60 days.
Less than 60 days.
We're going to have to do something with it. And then we're going to have to figure out who we're going to give the tent to. Well, we all know who the tent's going to.
Well, the tent was already given. The tent
Was paid for.
The tent is owned by
Yeah.
Homeward Bound,
Yeah.
so it's
Yeah.
their
Isn't it-
decision of what to do.
Isn't
with
that
the tent.
something? Yeah. So, I mean, you look at all of these decisions and you're like, do you want people downtown? Do you not want people downtown? Are you listening to the businesses? Because we walked, one of the first stories we did when actually before we went weekly, when we were going into, I'm doing the paper now because Phil's retired.
Mm-hmm.
We did our guy Brandon talked to close to 40 businesses. And they all said, not all, almost 2 of 1 said, our business is down. This is bad for business.
Mm-hmm.
Did the city talk to any of those people? And I think we found out, even if the city did, with all the stuff that went on with Jason, the city didn't care what they had to say. And there were a whole lot of people that we're hearing now that were afraid to say it.
Yeah, Lisa and I ran into that when we started this, 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
We went to a few of the businesses and they said, well, off the record, but we're not going to say it, so you can put it down, because they would have ramifications. They were
Yep.
afraid of that.
They were afraid from the city.
From the
From the
city.
city,
Yeah.
yes.
They would make statements like, yeah, our business is down. Yes, our customers are complaining about it. They would make the generic statements.
Everything
and
was
we
generic.
and we certainly reported that. But we didn't have anybody that would really stand up and say, hey, this is so-and-so, this is my business, and what the city's doing is really killing it.
Just axed it, yes.
Yeah.
Trout did come out and pretty
Trout.
well.
Yeah, oh yeah, he did. Well, Ben did, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
but Ben's is a different story. That's the construction.
Right.
But I can tell you that the 4th and 5th Street stuff doesn't help. Neither does the homeless center.
Mm-hmm.
None of that helps Ben.
Mm-hmm.
And we did get a couple of pretty good quotes from some folks that were directed toward it,
Mm-hmm.
but not flat out saying,
Right.
those kind of things. So it would lead me to one question: where would Jason ever get a list to get to his private group to who to retaliate against if nobody was on the record?
Well, and I, we know some of the groups that have been retaliated against because they were outspoken about it in their businesses, and one being the Heights, where they said, this isn't right, and they have been at city council meetings, and so
and to Andrea's credit and Greg both, they're great people. They care about Grand Junction a lot. I mean, this is a woman who ran for school board.
Which pays nothing.
Which pays nothing but pain.
Right.
Lots of pain.
And their meetings are
and
really
Greg
long.
has run for office. Yeah, and their meetings are absolutely off the charts, ridiculous in length. But, this is old hat for me. I've been boycotted several different times through different groups. I've had, the Ann Landman going around with signs to all my advertisers saying my business hates Democrats.
Ah, good to know. Didn't know that.
Yes, well, that's another story. That would just be a fun, offhand Mesa County Compass where you go, everything that's ever been said to Craig Hall in 25 years of writing columns.
So you did mention Jason.
Yes.
in your recent column.
Yes.
Today,
my last two. Well, one op-ed and one column. Yeah.
So talk to us about what you think and what you said, because Jason is coming on next week, and I'm sure that his view, just from what I've heard in his apology, is that he didn't mean it. He was just angry and off the cuff and at the moment. But I guess my other question is well, what was when you made that statement? What was your goal? If you didn't want people to hurt a business, and why would you not? Why would you say it? And did you think nothing's going to happen as a result of what I say?
Well, and that's basically what I think he thought, was because it was a private Facebook chat of 900 people. 900
people. First off, not private whatsoever. Number one. Number two, if you don't want it out there, don't put it on the internet. So he got caught. So the regret and the apology is because he got caught. But what concerns me the most is, and he said, these are his own words, he said it on that little, what do they call it, podcast that he was on. Won't give it any, don't give it any credit. I'm not going to, because I don't have any respect for where it came from. But he said, my first reaction was retaliation. You, sir, Jason, are not of the mindset and the capacity to serve the public, if that's your reaction. And the fact that you said it, the fact that you put it out to 900 people. Okay, here's the thing. It's already out to 900 people. And we recognized it, we saw it, and we had to put it out there too. So now it's out there to everybody who thinks like you do. Okay, I'm not finding fault in any of that, because people need to know that your city councilman is saying something like this. Okay, but in the world we live in today, how many people took that to heart immediately and are already boycotting those businesses and telling their friends to boycott those businesses because you put it in your little private Facebook group? Yeah. And they're all going, we don't want this. And let's just say it's a minority of people. Let's say it's 10,000 people in Grand Junction who are all behind what city council's doing. Well, when you live in a town of 40,000, 50,000, whatever, 70,000, and more than 10% of them, maybe a good chunk of those are your customers. So what has he already accomplished by doing that? He's accomplished retaliation by simply stating it, writing it in that group. And I'll tell you why people are going to do it. Because the comments that went further down as you read that thread were people in the group asking city council for a list of those businesses. That's frightening. That's intimidation. That's the force of government. That is not.
That's a strong arm. That's bad.
That's strong arm. And you've literally got an elected government official saying, boycott these businesses. Because you can parse it. It's a little bit parsed. And no, what he's saying is we need to boycott these businesses because they didn't do what I wanted to do. And I'm sorry, you have forfeited your ability to serve. You've surrendered it. You've obliterated anything you say now. So what you're telling me, Jason, it's just Jason now. Because he's not Councilman Jason. He's not allowed to. See, when he's private, he's not a councilman.
Right.
Okay. Sorry, you got elected, you're a councilman. I'm never not the publisher of the Business Times. As long as I print it, I'm never not.
That's exactly right.
Okay, so I'm speaking as publisher of the Business Times, but I'm also a private citizen. Okay, fine. But I'm still the publisher of the Business Times.
The first thing people recognize about you is the publisher of Business Times.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. So he says something like, you're also telling me that you only say what you really mean when you're in a private group. So who exactly is Councilman Nguyen? Because obviously he doesn't say what he really thinks when he's playing on city council.
He has two hats.
Yep. It's flip a coin. Which Jason you going to get? You going to get just Jason or going to get Councilman Jason? Because I got news for you. I'd rather have just Jason, because at least he tells you what he's thinking.
That's honesty.
Yeah, at least he's on. At least just Jason is the honest one. That's the saddest part of all this. Councilman Jason will say or do or vote any way that promotes and does his agenda, and that's the only reason he's on council. That's why he's not fit to serve. That's why. And yes, I called for council to remove him, and learning what you learn about how, because politicians always write their rules to benefit them for when they're in office. Council can't remove him, but council does a whole lot of stuff that they vote themselves the power to do. So my advice to council, and I know it's going to sound crazy, is vote yourself the authority to remove a council member. You'll probably win it on a 4-3 vote, and then immediately take another 4-3 vote and get rid of Jason. The guy needs to go. He has completely lost his ability to serve the people of Grand Junction. And if he was honest, just Jason, he'd know he knows he needs to resign. He has to know it, but he likes playing Councilman Jason too much to do that. And
because of the power.
By the way, the power. Businesses be damned, citizens be damned, community input be damned, everything be damned. And go back to the initial part of this conversation. Our other esteemed ex-mayor said, "Boy, if this is the way council is going to run, it's bad. If this, this new
Democracy's in balance again.
This democracy is. So wait a minute, Anna. That's how council used to run. You're claiming council now is running the way it used to run, and any clear-thinking individual goes, no, this is running different. Okay, so which one is bad? I think the old way was bad for the city. Now, to be determined whether the new way will end up bad, but they've only taken one vote.
Well, I think that what we hope to see, this is regardless of the council, is that when there is an issue that will impact the community, that you need to make sure the community is aware. You cannot do small groups, hand-selected groups. You need to have more community input, and you have to figure out
over this.
Yeah, you could have town halls, but you have to engage all aspects of the community. And that was one thing I talked to Randall about on some of theirs. I said, Randall, it seems to me like none of your decisions over here are looking at a fourth of the population is retired, and they can't or won't ride a bicycle.
You've got retirees, you've got ditch diggers, you've got politicians, you've got lawyers, you've got doctors, and
yeah, you got a lot of doctors.
Yeah.
We won't go there.
Towels are renowned for it. You got a lot of doctors.
But
Heck, I got a lot of doctors.
But the people need to know, and it needs to be the vision of the community, not the vision of city council. And I agree with you, Craig, that it needs to be, our role needs to be small. Our role needs to be taking care of what
we're supposed to take care of.
Business.
And then not trying to find ways that we can do all of our pet projects and our legacy projects so that it looks good. Well, if we put in a parking meter, we could have and have it paid more. We can have more money, and it's not a tax; it's a fee. But you look at
that's a statewide problem. But yeah.
But if you look at all of the money that really does come in and the different sources, our city sales tax is expensive, and then they get 8 mills if you live in the city to operate with too. And then they'll pass different things. We'll take grant money and we create a new position. If you asked Diane Schwinke how much the government has grown, well, we have to pay salaries for all those people now. Yeah. And those people need assistance. And I'm not even sure that the program needs to be involved, much less the continuing paying for that position that we've created.
Well, if they want to create new positions, there are just as many that they could get rid of to fund those. We've got useless positions in the city as well. It's government. It's like a big bank. There's a reason Bill's over there in the corner office. Just pay him to keep him out of the way. But see, to me, when they absolutely should be getting public input and taking it all into account, which we know on the 4th and 5th Street projects they did not. But at the same time, if it takes all of this input and you're getting, you always have the extremes on both sides. And this whole thing's a giant muddled mess, and people are going at it, and they don't want this, or I want that, and you get to do this, you have to do. See, the only question that arises out of that for me is, should we even be doing it? And that really, that should be the last question, because the answer is probably no. Okay, you're overstepping what we really need you to do.
Right.
Okay, we want the streets clean, we want the potholes filled. If we use the city for trash pickup, we want our trash picked up on time, yada yada. We'd like the golf courses to be green.
Yes.
And we're abysmal failure this year blame the weather, fine, but you could
water it.
You can make me feel like you're doing more.
Well, at least you get out the spray can and paint it green.
Well, paint it over. I don't know, something. But anyway, but to me that is what usually happens with government, and how I look at it a lot of times is like, should you even be doing that? Is that the role of government? Is the role of government to maintain Whitman Park? Yes. To make it safe? Yes. Is the role of government to make it look like a Carnival cruise ship for people entering who just drove from the Brown of Delta to the Brown of Grand Junction, to make it the giant Carnival cruise ship welcome center? No. But it could look nice. So why don't you just make it look nice? Instead, we've got to have this master plan that we got to give upward, budgeted $500,000 to give to somebody's buddies in Boulder. We couldn't fund a Parks and Recreation planning person for $500,000, given salaries, even the exorbitant city salaries. Sounds like you could hire somebody for 5 years to do that. Why can't we do that? Why do we have to give $500,000 to Boulder? And then what?
For a plan.
And then to outsource the construction of it? Who knows what we're going to do with that, right?
Exactly.
According to Cody, it could be a $5 million project.
Right.
That's $5.5 million.
For what?
For doing something for who?
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Well, we have discussed a bunch of stuff. We
Again.
We haven't solved any problems, but I
No.
think what we've basically decided is people need to be informed.
Yep.
They need to know what's going on. They need to have people that represent, because even with Jason, and I'm going to put one little point in here, is Jason was elected from a district, but Jason represents the entire city. And so you need to make sure that you are representing your entire constituency when you're making your decisions. And that they need to be more transparent. They need to figure out a way to get more public input and maybe slow down their decision-making process and determine, is this a want or is this a need? Let's take care of all the needs.
Or is it a requirement?
Or is it a requirement?
Take care of what's necessary.
You said you were going to take care of. Because we talked about the Orchard Mesa pool at the opening of this. And obviously it's not being taken care of. And it's your responsibility to take care of it. But all we get are stories, and I'll go a little bit to the role of the paper that I see as we move along.
And yes, and
our job is just to inform you of all this stuff. And then it's up to the citizens to say, I'm going to get active on this. I'm going to call my councilman, I'm going to call council, I'm going to email all of them, or whatever it may be. And some of these other things are my opinions, but the role of the paper is to get people informed. This is what's going on. This is what they're thinking about. And occasionally, sorry, Jason, this is what you said, and this is what you did. And, there might be fallout from that. But there's fallout from all of these projects that they're working on. There's fallout from all of these plans that they're working on. And it's obvious they're not either hearing from, but I think it's more they're not listening to, because it's the Sentinel poll with very specific answers that the Senate, you can choose from these 4 answers. And more than 75% of the people said this project was a mistake from the beginning.
Right.
And yet, for how long now? Year and a half, 2 years? Was it?
Well, I think it's been just
a little
year.
over a year. A little over a year.
Yeah.
They've been pushing this, and all their PR has been pro the project.
Mm-hmm.
You've never heard a city. Well, Cody would come out and say, "Hey, when we're talking to people," and he says it. I've walked 4th and 5th Street.
Mm-hmm.
I walked and talked to the merchants.
Mm-hmm.
He's not hearing positive or pro stuff from the vast majority of the people. So how can we come out with some of the stories that we see?
Mm-hmm.
How can we come, it's got to be because your questions are very specific, your answers are very specific, and any answer that you don't like,
And so your paper will now be providing more.
Well, we're going to provide more answers.
More answers.
Sure,
Yes,
because we're going to ask. Well, here's the other thing: we're going to ask the questions that aren't getting asked.
There you go.
But I will tell you this: it's harder and harder to get them asked through the city communication system. Yes.
Oh, and why is that?
Well,
Because you can't get access.
They got gatekeepers. Yeah.
Ah,
okay.
But you also, as a newspaper, we have to. We try to abide by, here's the communication set up. Here, you take this question, goes through here. Or you ask this question here, we'll get it to the right person. Mm-hmm. And, I hate to say it, but it's just easier to go right to someone you know.
Right.
Go right to someone you know, go right to the source.
Right.
But,
and is that not how it should be? If I don't understand why. No, I'm serious about this. I don't understand why somebody is sacrosanct and you because one, you're paying their salary.
Yep.
They are supposed to be helping you. I mean, talking to the city manager on down.
Yeah.
Why can't I talk to the city manager?
Why can't I just call them? Yeah.
I
Because here's the
understand
thing.
they're busy.
They're busy,
They
but
don't have
it's
to get
part
to
of
me
their
right
job.
that day.
Number one. Okay, because I represent the public, whether they like it or don't like it. I represent the reading public.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, why wouldn't you be eager to give your answer to a newspaper? If your answer's that good,
Mm-hmm.
and you are you're an overall positive good,
Mm-hmm.
then why wouldn't you be just excited? Why aren't you coming to me to say, "Hey, talk to me"?
Right.
Yeah, it should be.
There's a couple council members that do that, but there ain't many. We'll see how the new folks do.
Okay.
That will be interesting.
So we'll have Craig back to see how
Oh,
they're
boy.
responding to him. And if
Well,
he
you
still
don't
has
want
a
to know how they're
newspaper-
responding to me personally, but we'll tell you how they're responding to the paper.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, you've been watching Mesa County Compass. This is the facts as we know them, the truth as we see it. You decide. Thanks.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
Fun time again.